It is the zombie apocalypse. The virus is airborne and has instantly turned everyone around you into a flesh-hungry corpse. Where would you go? And what would you do to survive? Bethany was working as the manager of the Louisville Gigamart. She was in the upstairs office working on some scheduling when her co-worker let out a gasp and fell to the ground. Bethany went to help her and realized that she was dead. She ran to call for help. Then suddenly her co-worker stood back up. As soon as Bethany laid eyes on her co-worker, she knew it was no longer her anymore. The co-worker immediately tried to grab a hold of Bethany and bite her, so she defended herself. Then, to her horror, she saw the rest of the store had also turned. She had no choice but to fight them all. There were 2 in the hallway and 1 in the office. Then 2 more showed up. Bethany swung the bat as hard as she could and eventually was victorious. But as she was turning the corner, she was ambushed by more of them. Panicking, she barely got away, but one managed to scratch her badly in the tussle. She tore up her socks to stop the bleeding and then got back in the fight. They were all people she worked with. She was literally just working on their schedule for the following week when she was upstairs. Now, they were trying to rip her apart with their teeth. Bethany walked to the window, and all she could see was more of the dead people, mindlessly wandering everywhere. She was completely surrounded. She decided she was going to make a stand here in the grocery store. The number of windows made it very unsafe, but the amount of food that was here, she would never go hungry at least. Quickly and quietly, she started collecting all the perishable food in the entire store and getting it in the refrigeration units. There was no telling how long the power would be on for, but the longer this food could stay fresh, the better. The water was still on, but there was no telling for how long either, so Bethany filled up all the bottles she could find. The dead ones would come and challenge her territory, but only a couple at a time. They were relatively easy to dispatch. She transferred 3 large refrigerators upstairs and got all the fresh food in the store into them. She had disassembled some shelves to block the stairwell with, and was now relatively safe upstairs, as long as she was quiet. After a short rest, Bethany put a rope from the office window down to the main level, climbed down, and began collecting all the food from the store shelves to bring upstairs. The dead ones were all over the parking lot, and with the big windows, everything could see right into the store. Every time she went downstairs, she would have to fight some of them that had wandered in. She would amuse herself momentarily by trying on the various hats that they were wearing. Around the 6th day, she heard a helicopter overhead, possibly looking for people to rescue, but she could not go outside into certain death to try and get their attention. After the helicopter left the next morning, she went downstairs and the place was completely overrun. The sound of the helicopter must have scattered them around and a bunch of them wandered into the store. Bethany was a natural fighter. The fear that would kick in when she saw danger gave her the strength to fight with everything she had. She had plenty of fresh produce left and had packed on some extra weight from eating so well. On the outside, it would almost seem like she was thriving. However, her mind was slowly unraveling from fear and loneliness. The only faces she would see now were horrifying versions of people she used to know, now walking around with twisted evil faces. She was covered in blood all the time and would sometimes hear other people outside the store screaming for their lives or unloading firearms. It was a war zone all around her, and sometimes it would pour into the windows. At this point, Bethany would use any weapon available or her feet to fight. She was nearing 20 days inside the store now, and it was time for her to start wolfing down all the perishable food before it goes rotten. She sat on the floor and ate as much food as she could. Eat and fight. Eat and fight. Over and over again for days and days, until all the perishable food was gone and the power went out. Bethany now had to ration the canned and dried foods as long as she could stretch it, eating only when extremely hungry. The boredom and depression were now starting to overwhelm her mind. Her only form of entertainment now was fighting and searching the dead ones, and the 1 meal a day she was allowed to eat. She felt dead, even more so than the actual dead that she fought. Her body could survive this for a long time with what supplies she had, but would her mind make it that long? Slowly, day by day, she lost a little more of herself. Now stripped down to just her Gigamart vest, she wore blood instead of clothes and shoes, stomping their faces with her bare feet to feel the crunch in between her toes. Sometimes she would dance for hours and hours, with nothing else to do. Just moving her body for a while felt nice. She wasn't keeping track of time anymore, but she had been in that store now for nearly 3 months, stuck in a perpetual cycle of carnage. Sometimes she would injure herself or her feet, and eventually she cut all of her hair off. She was unrecognizable now from who she used to be. Battle-hardened and fully insane. The dead ones became a joke to her. Her hatred for them made her taunt them, sometimes breaking their legs for fun and trapping them in places that they couldn't get out, or letting them chase her around. Sometimes she would play hide and seek with them too. Really anything she could think of to entertain herself. Helicopters would fly by all the time, and always lead more inside for her to play with, and more hats to try on. Eventually winter came, and it got cold. Bethany was long gone now. Having full conversations with teddy bears and even the dead people, she piled all her food onto the floor and let the bears guard it for her. Her cycle repeated. Day after day. Eat, fight, sleep, and repeat. Again, and again, and again. Then, the water and food was gone. Bethany had run out of clean water long ago and had to suffer the stomach pain of drinking tainted rainwater to survive. It had been almost 6 months now that Bethany had been trapped in the Gigamart. No help ever came, and the seasons changed, hiding in her empty office. She began to starve to death. She could hear a helicopter hovering above, and zombies trying to break through her barricades. Today was the end, and she had only one last thing to do before departing this hell. She had her last dance while standing on broken glass, barefoot. Then, after losing enough blood, went quietly into the night. Bethany had survived for 5 months and 23 days, and she had killed 304 zombies. She was a strong survivor, but ultimately, the apocalypse always wins eventually. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider hitting that thumbs up button or even possibly subscribing. It would mean the world to Bethany and I.